Intellectual Forum, Puri. Today we are going to have the 11th lecture. It is under the title Action, Bondage and Liberation. In the last class, Professor Das spoke on action as well as knowledge, but he took action as the immediate cause of bondage, and he took knowledge as the root cause of bondage. So he talked extensively on knowledge in the last class, and he said that in most of the schools of Indian thought, it is usually accepted that knowledge liberates, but he in his lecture pointed out in the last class that the knowledge is not going to liberate you unless and until after attaining the true knowledge you are not renunciating your lobha, your krodha, the bad thoughts, past dispositions, past memories or bad memories. So as long as there is clinging to this material world, to this Maya-oriented world, as long as there is a clinging on our part, even though you have knowledge, still you practice clinging to this world, then that will not help you in achieving liberation. That's why he took the example of sadhus and the so-called sadhus and sannyasis, who definitely have attained a height of knowledge, but due to their vasanas, due to their past dispositions, due to their clinging to the material world, they involve in certain activities which may not be called in the true sense sattvic. That's why many of the sadhus, some of the sadhus are behind the bars, which was the central to the talk in the last class. That's why after attaining knowledge, one should carry on the path of renunciation of the past dispositions, past clingings, so that we can set the path, so that the path of liberation could be clearly seen to us, or we set foot on the path of liberation. But today, he is on a different platform. He is concentrating on action or karma, and he'll be speaking of on how he tries to bring a linkage between karma and how it binds, and what is the way out. So he's talking on action by taking it along with bondage, and how we can be liberated from the state of bondage. So like the earlier lectures, we also hope to have a very good lecture this evening. Without wasting much time, let us all move to Professor Das for having yet another good lecture on a very good title, Action, Bondage and Liberation, in the lines of the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you all. Now let us move to Professor Das for the lecture. Over to Professor Das.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir, you are audible. You are audible.
Respected Dr. Rao, esteemed members of Wisdom Intellectual Forum Puri, very esteemed participants of this session. Today we have a very beautiful topic, action, bondage and liberation. We shall discuss that. In the last session, we were discussing that karma is not the root cause of bondage. The root cause of bondage is ignorance. Similarly, knowledge is not the direct cause of liberation. It is through renunciation. Mere knowledge cannot or may not liberate us, because we have seen that only theoretical knowledge is not enough to help us liberate from our bondage. So knowledge should be practiced. That practice is renunciation. We have to renunciate the obstructing elements which stand before all types of perfection, which cause bondage. So we had discussed ignorance, action, bondage, knowledge, renunciation, liberation. Today we shall discuss how particularly action is related to both bondage and liberation. One thing more we had discussed that we think that we are doing action, but we are always engaged with many types of reactions. We just react to the situation. Our reactions are the reactions of our vasanas, tendencies, habits, propensities, and mistakenly we call the reaction as the action. Then the question may come, which action is not reaction? The action which is free from selfish desires, the action which is meant for lokasangraha, well-being of the society, the action which is done in the sense of duty, the action which is performed in order to protect dharma, and the action which is done selflessly without having karta bhava, and the action which is dedicated to God. God means to the cosmic soul, to the higher soul. Such actions are not reactions. Scientifically, we can say the action which is focused, which focuses on the present moment, the action which is engaged in the present time, the present situation, that is not a reaction. For example, we were discussing about the activity of a doctor when he is operating a patient in the operation theater, and he is dealing with the knife. Then he is very much alert with the present situation, because that is a question of life and death, and he is completely attentive at the present moment. Scientifically, we can discuss this. And I had given another example of the cricket, that when a batsman is hitting the ball, there he plays the role of a batsman without having any preoccupied thought, impression that he belongs to India or Pakistan. He should behave like that. If he is overconfident about the previous score, or if he is nervous about the previous failure, then he cannot hit the ball. And the ball comes in the present moment. The ball is instant. The ball is the present moment. The ball is the present. Ball is itself the present. So the batsman hits the ball as the ball deserves. Not that the bowler is a bowler is the bowler belongs to Pakistan or any other country. If such things will come to the mind, then that will be a reaction. That I am not hitting the ball, I am hitting Pakistan. That ball is not Pakistan. That ball is not any other country. That ball is a ball that comes with a motion, with a direction, and that is unique, that is final, that is instantly that is coming, and I have to hit the ball as the ball deserves. This was the problem of Arjuna in the battlefield. Arjuna did not hit the ball as a true batsman. He was confused of many things about the past memories and the future imaginations. Past memory means they are my relatives, so why should I fight with them? Future imagination means what shall I get after this fight? I do not need kingdom or anything material at the cost of a bloodshed. That means Arjuna was not interested in war in the war field, and that was his adharma. That was not his swadharma. Swadharma means I should be engaged in a particular place, in a particular time, in a particular circumstance, very promptly, with an alert mind, with the demand of the situation. And that is dharma in that context. If I am not doing that, then my wisdom about dharma is useless. I have read so many scriptures, so many things, that is useless. Because if I fail to perform my dharma, even in a small situation, if I fail to manage that. So every time is the time of hitting the ball. Every moment the ball is coming, and as a batsman, we should be ready to hit the ball as the ball deserves. Such action is not a reaction. There are now we shall discuss another thing, how we are always engaged with reactions. We have different types of habits. That is our sanskara. Habits means the actions, knowledge, my emotion also, in which I am built up, in which I I am habituated. Not only my action, but also my emotion. My emotion is also my vasana. That means if a particular situation will come, I shall feel this way, and that man will feel that way, and different people will feel in different ways. So feelings are also different. Feeling of a person is distinct. Similarly, thoughts are also distinct. Thoughts means how we interpret. I saw something, I perceived something, then I started interpreting, I started thinking about that. And the way I think is my vasana, because I shall think in a particular way. Not only I think in a particular way, I try to justify it by supplying a suitable logic, suitable reason. And I believe that that reason is correct. And then I come to a conclusion that this is correct, this is my view. And by this way, all the philosophical views in the philosophical systems have been built up, and we have so many philosophical systems. Many philosophers, many views, many human beings, many minds, many thoughts. Thought is not bad, vasana is not bad, desire is not bad. The problem is we are engaged with some unnecessary desires. That is the problem. We are engaged with some unnecessary desires, some imaginary desires, and that is our world. We live in that world. Suppose I saw something, then I interpreted that fact in my own way, and I supplied a reason to it. Then I came to a conclusion that becomes my conviction, that becomes my view, that becomes my conclusion, and that becomes my lifestyle. That becomes my world. That means I live in my imaginary world. That world is not the real world. Similarly, none of us, nobody, we do not live in the real physical world. Somehow or other, we live in our dream world, we live in our imaginary world. So far as ignorance is concerned, if you are knowledgeable, if we are not biased by ignorance, if we are not biased by vasanas, that's all right. That is our goal. The goal of life is that freedom. We should be free from that. We should be free from our imaginary world. The actual world is not the problem for us. The imaginary world is our own making, and that is the problem for us. We imagine the world. Not only we imagine, we give logic to it, and we build a system, thought system, that this is my faith, this is my conviction, this is my personality, this is my character, that we proclaim. This is my personality means I have certain beliefs, my world view is something different, my likeness and dislikeness are distinct. I like and I dislike so many things. And likeness and dislikeness are also personal. Likeness and dislikeness are also personal. There is nothing to like in this world. There is nothing to dislike in this world because this world is the world. It is the objective world. We divide the objective world into two parts. That is the world of likeness and the world of dislikeness. And that is our own making. We divide the world into likeness and dislikeness. Then we become attached to the object of likeness and we become averse to or detached from the, or we hate, we dislike the other world. This division is my division. And the object I like, that is disliked by other, and the object I dislike, that is liked by other. Therefore, this division is subjective. This division is my psychological division. And I live in that psychological division. Similarly, all others live in their psychological worlds. Even husband and wife, they live in one room, but they live in their own personal world. There is a compromise between these two worlds. We are just making compromises and living together by compromising between the different subjective worlds. Now the question is, the objective world is not a problem for us. Our attachment with the objective world is also not the problem. The problem is that we create certain imaginary world which does not exist, and we become attached to that imaginary world. Therefore, any action that we do being engaged in our imaginary world are the false actions. That means we are engaged with the false actions. As we are engaged in the dream state when we sleep in night. We sleep in the night, we see many dreams, and we are engaged in our dream. But when we wake up, we find that these were false. Similarly, in the waking state, we are engaged in our imaginary worlds actively, lively, and we have certain desires, we have certain thoughts, conclusions, convictions about that imaginary world, and ultimately we get attached to that imaginary world, and then in order to satisfy ourselves, we think that is my world, that is our world, and we do certain activities. We become engaged in that imaginary world by doing certain actions, and all these actions are false actions. These actions are baseless because they belong to the imaginary world. Now we shall come to our practical life and we shall see whether it is a fact or not. Suppose many times we have misunderstandings. We misunderstand our friends. We misunderstand husband misunderstands wife. Wife misunderstands husband. A friend misunderstands another friend. And misunderstanding is also justified by a reason. And those who misunderstand, they never admit that they are misunderstanding. They think that they are misunderstanding. that they are understanding. This is their understanding. That is true. That is correct. They may come to know that their thought was wrong. Many of us must have experienced this. So many years we live in illusions with wrong thoughts, wrong conceptions. Now you imagine if my thought was wrong, my impression was wrong, my conviction was wrong, then whatever I have done out of the reaction of that thought, that conviction, these are all false actions. Unnecessarily, I am bound by such actions. That means we have two worlds. One is Vastava, the other is Avastava. The real world and the other is the unreal world. The real world, that is also phenomenal, that is also not real, we shall come to that. The real world, as it is explained by Buddha, Immanuel Kant, and so many others, they think that the real world is also not real, that is phenomenal. But I am not discussing that. I am giving a concession, at least now accept the view that the real world is real. Our bondage is so intense, how we are trapped. The real world is not real, we shall discuss that. But there is an imaginary world, the world of our vasana, the world of our reactions, the world of our mental projections, the world of our thoughts, our likeness, our dislikeness, our mental constructions. We think that imaginary world is also real world. That means we think that dream is also real. Waking state is unreal. We shall discuss that. But we are so bound, we are so trapped by ignorance, we think that even our dream is also real. So this is the influence of ignorance. First of all, we have to be free from our dream state. That is the first qualification. 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, 60 years, all the ashramas, brahmacharya, grahastha, vanaprastha, all these periods have been spent by living in a false world, by living in an imaginary world, having false desires. False desires. So the first qualification is that we have to realize that this is a dream state. This is my imagination. This is my interpretation. This is my feelings. This is not the reality. This is the reality as I think, as I feel, as I interpret. I have to go beyond that. Then in the waking state, as dream is gone, I wake up. Dream is gone, I wake up. Now this waking state is also false. This is also not real. How can we realize that? Then we shall discuss. That means, first of all, by knowledge, we have to renunciate this false world, the false attachments that is befooling us so many years, so many ways. we are befooled by our own imaginary world, our own imaginary convictions, our own imaginary false ideas, false desires. We shall try to live in the real world. Real world means the world. What is the real world in the scientific sense? Not in the Vedantic sense, in scientific sense. The real world is the world which exists independent of my interpretations. Just opposite. What is the imaginary world? What is the false world? The world that I imagine. The world that I have mentally constructed. The world I like, the world I dislike, the world of my vasanas, the world of my desires, that is the false world. I should not be engaged in this world. Then come to the real world, and the scientifically we can define the real world is the world which exists, which functions independent of our subjective interpretations. Suppose I do not like sun, that will not affect sun's activities. Suppose I do not like moon, suppose I do not like any season, suppose I do not like day and night, that will not affect that. Whatever may be my interpretation, the cosmic principle, the cosmos will exist in order without any hesitation, without any exception, without any disturbance. Hydrogen, oxygen, water, there is nothing to interpret. That does not change according to my interpretation. So the world that objectively exists and that functions according to its laws of physics, independent of my interpretations, independent of my thoughts, feelings, emotions, that world is the real world. And I exist in that real world. This is one state of my consciousness. If I am little more qualified, if I transcend to a minimum level of consciousness, then at least I can realize, I can observe this scientific world, the world free from myself, the world free from myself. So first one, the first world is my subjective world. Most of all, we live in our subjective world. Therefore, we remain in stress. All types of depressions, all types of stress that belong to our subjective world. Because we think about that, because we interpret unnecessarily about past and future. We do not know what will happen in future. But even the results of an action, even the consequences of an action is also imaginary. We should not overthink about the consequences of action that belongs to that imaginary world. If we remain engaged with our past memory, that is also our imaginary world. That is not the real world. The real world is the bowler is bowling, the bowler is throwing the ball, and I am a batsman, and I should focus on that ball and that ball, and I should hit the ball as the ball deserves. That is the real world. The real world for Arjuna was to fight. No thought, no question, no confusion. Because all others are ready to fight except Arjuna. Nobody had any problem except Arjuna. Arjuna was confused. So that was the real world. The war field is the real world. Arjuna was confused because of his imaginary world. So the first qualification is, the first state of liberation is, how can we attain liberation? Liberation, we should not take that in the as a noun, liberation. Let us take it as a verb, liberate, liberate. We can attain liberation when we can liberate ourselves from our own, our self-made conditionings. So in the first step, as we came to know that we are living in our imaginary worlds, and therefore we are suffering 90% psychosomatic disease and all types of depression, stress that belong to that world, that imaginary world, that do not belong. The corona, that is the present, corona is not the problem. That is not the real problem. The real problem is the stress about corona. Our pure psychosis, our failure of management, our thought management is wrong. We overthink of that. We are not conscious of that. We imagine so many things. Therefore, maximum people are suffering because of their imaginations. Plague, malaria disease, then plague, then corona, plague and malaria. These two diseases were infected through non-human creatures and they were controlled. Malaria was controlled, plague was controlled. That means mosquitoes can be controlled, but this corona is infected through human beings. This is not being controlled. This is a mockery to our human intelligence. Mosquitoes are controlled. All these two diseases, pandemics, malaria and plague, these two diseases were controlled. But corona, which is spreading through human body, through human beings, that is not controlled, because man is the most indisciplined being in this earth. Man has condemned everything. Man has destroyed everything. Man has polluted everything. Now in this period of crisis also, man is not serious. So this is so, but man is suffering from the misuse of personality, misuse of intelligence. One of the misuse of intelligence is to imaginary unnecessary things, is to entertain unnecessary desires, and to being attached with a false world or imaginary world. That means we have to liberate ourselves. We have to liberate ourselves from our imaginary world, imaginary desires, false world, and that is the first step of liberation. Because the actions we do being engaged in a false world are all fake actions, unnecessary actions, useless actions, and as a rational being, nobody should have that type of unnecessary bondage. Then comes the real world, and the real world is the world that is free from our interpretations. Now, we shall see, and we have to admit, we shall not go to any metaphysics. We shall not go to say that this world is unreal, Jagat Mithya, as Vedanta said. The next step, beyond the imaginary world, beyond the false world, the next world comes, the scientific world, the real world, the world that exists and functions independent of our interpretations. If at least we understand this truth, that independent of my interpretation, independent of my thoughts, my likeness, my dislikeness, my reactions, an objective world can exist. This knowledge is enough. This knowledge is enough. That means the world is functioning in its own way. Then why should I interpret in my own way? The world is functioning in its own way. Who am I to interpret, to impose my likeness, dislikeness, to interfere in the activity of the cosmos? If I am really rational, why should I interpret? If I interpret, then I live in that imaginary world. If I am free from that imaginary world, I have been transformed into a higher level of consciousness. That means I am free from the dream state. If now I am in the waking state, now I should be aware of my separate existence from the world. This knowledge is also enough for our liberation. This is also a freedom of ignorance. That means we should not interfere the natural process of everything. We shall simply observe. We shall not impose our likeness. We shall not impose our likeness, dislikeness, our opinion, our view, our interpretation on anything objective that is happening, that is there according to its own law, according to its own course. That means I, as a rational being very much scientific, I came to know now that I am not this world. In the first stage, I had a wrong conception. I was convinced wrongly that I am this world. This emotion, I am that feeling. I am this emotion. But now I came to understand scientifically that I am different from this Jagat. I am separate from this Jagat. That means now unnecessary vasanas, unnecessary desires, unnecessary actions cannot disturb me. I am free from that. Now we shall come to the true vasana, the real vasana, the true desires, real desires, because without desire, without kamana, without vasana also, we cannot exist. Even if we are doing certain good works, that is also our habits, past habits. Suppose we are serving, suppose we are giving charity, that is also our past disposition. That is also my past habit. So that vasana is also the cause of my good actions. So now the question comes, whether good actions can bind us or not. Imaginary actions bind us, no doubt. False actions bind us, no doubt. False attachments bind us, no doubt. Now we are doing so many good actions, noble actions, perfect actions. Now the question is, do such actions bind us or not? Is there any concession to it or not? If I am doing a good action, a noble action, then am I free? Am I bound or free? That is the question. Action, bondage, and liberation. So now actions are divided into two types. False actions. Unnecessary actions, they are rejected. I am now free from that. Now, where I am doing certain good works. Now the question is whether these good actions will bind me or not. Whether these good actions will bind me or not. Here comes the distinction between Prakriti and Sanskriti. Now we have come to a second stage of our discussion. The imaginary world is out. The false desires, false attachments, they are all out. Now we are now living in the scientific world, the real world, that we cannot avoid. Scientific world means the world that we understand exists without our interpretations. We are aware of the fact that we should not interpret. Now in this world, this question still remains to us. That question is whether good actions bind us or not. So here comes the question of Prakriti and Sanskriti. Prakriti, that is also Vasana. Prakriti, my Prakriti is of three types, Sattva, Raja and Tama. Tamasic actions bind, Rajasic actions bind. Now the question comes, whether Sattvic actions, those actions are noble actions, good actions, even charity, even I am serving for the community. That Sattvic actions, whether they are cause, that can be the cause of my bondage or not. The answer is, be it Sattvic, be it Rajasic, be it Tamasic, if it is a product of Prakriti, it will bind. It will bind. Because it is from Prakriti. better Prakriti, best Prakriti, but it is Prakriti. Though it is prompted by a Prakriti, by a Vasana, by a predisposition, predisposition means there is a gravitational pull. It is sattvic, but it will bind us. Therefore, we can convert Prakriti to Sanskriti. Sanskriti should not be translated as culture, as we generally do. Exactly, that is not culture. We shall not discuss that. That Indian culture, Western culture, we shall not discuss that. Because culture is also used in horticulture, agriculture. So we shall not go to that English word culture. But Sanskriti is a term that is specifically used for human actions, human life, that is not used for agriculture or horticulture. Sanskriti means the ultimate perfection of our energy, ultimate utilization of our energy, ultimate understanding of our ultimate understanding of the truth. That means that is free from Prakriti. It is not bound by Prakriti, even not in the sattvic form. I admit that there is the real world, okay? I also admit that I do not interfere, but the moment I am doing an action, if I think that I am doing sattvic action, that egocentric feelings will bind me. That means in Prakriti, the sense of ego is dominant. Be it sattvic, be it rajasic, be it tamasic. Sattvic ego, rajasic ego, and tamasic ego, but ego is there. But in Sanskriti, it is selfless, it is egoless. The same world is there, the scientific world is there, which I do not interfere. I am innocent. I could understand the distinction between myself and the Jagat, the real world. But the difference is that how I am attached to this real world by Prakriti, and the other possibility is by Sanskriti. If I am attached with this empirical world by my Prakriti, even it be the highest Prakriti, the best quality, that is sattvic, and if I am identified with my ego, that I am the agent, I am doing this work, that will bind me. That will bind me. Because even if I am doing charity, even if I am doing certain noble works, if I am conscious that I am doing this and I am maintaining a diary, I am daily writing all these things, what such noble works I am doing, and I am seeking for appreciation, and I have that type of some hidden attachments to my good works, that is also bondage. The difference is the difference between the iron chain and a golden chain. That is an iron chain, that is tamasic, and the sattvic chain is a golden chain, but I am bound. So we have to convert our Prakriti to Sanskriti. Sanskriti means doing an action not out of Prakriti, but out of wisdom, but out of consciousness. because that is the highest dynamism of my being, my being. Now the question is, there was imaginary world, the imaginary world is out. Now there is the real world, and I stand as a counterpart of the real world. Now the question is, who am I? Who am I? The question comes. If I am a sattvic being, then I have, that means my original status of being, that I am a soul, that I have consciousness, that is wrongly identified with my ego. And that action also bind me. Therefore, we have to go to the next step. That next step is, we have to understand the fullest manifestation of my being. Yes, I am not the imaginary being, but I am also not a being only confined to my body, mind, intellect, and ego. I am beyond that. I am beyond that. Then who is acting? Three things, three possibilities. The imaginary actor was acting, that is corrected. In the second step, the actor, the agent, who is thinking himself as body, mind, intellect, ego, that this is my body, this is my mind, this is my buddhi, and this is myself, I am so and so, I have such qualifications, etc. If I am thinking this way, if this person is working, then that is another status of action. That is prakriti. If I go beyond that, I shall simply observe. In the second stage, I observe the function of the external world. Yes, it is functioning there. I shall not interpret. In the third stage, I also observe myself, that this is my body is working, my mind is thinking, my heart is feeling. I am repeating. In the first stage, I have no consciousness. I just go with the flow of my imagination. I just follow my imagination. I follow my vasanas, and I live in an imaginary world. I have no freedom at all. In the second stage, I am now qualified to observe the external world. That yes, there is the external world, and I am distinct, I am separate, I have my separate existence. I am working in this world without interfering. But who is working? Now, I myself is the body, which I am not. I think that I am my mind, which I am not. I think I am my feelings, which I am not. I think I am myself, which I am not. This is also a wrong knowledge. It is because of prakriti. It may be sattvic, but it is also a type of a bondage. As I observe the external world, similarly, I have to observe my own activities, my own engagements. Who is getting angry? Who is hungry? Who is acting? Who is batting in the battlefield? If I think that I am Tendulkar or I belong to India, that means I am under Prakriti. If I focus on the bats and I focus on the motion of the ball, then there is only action. There is no agent at all. There is no agent. There is only action. then the batsman will never feel nervous, will never feel disturbed, and will never be absent minded, and he will be called a karma yogi. In the second stage, when I am able to observe the external world, still I am trapped by my false sense of ego that I am doing this work, I am the agent, this is my house, this is my son, this is my wife, this is my achievement. I have created so much things. I have this knowledge. I am a speaker. I am a teacher. I am a king. This is my body. I am handsome. I am rich. I am poor. All these things because I became free from my false interpretations. But I am not free from my own thoughts, my own bindings, because I am under the influence of a Prakriti. Therefore, by proper wisdom, wisdom means proper knowledge, higher knowledge, by the higher consciousness, I have to transcend myself also. That is called Atma Samikhya, self-analysis. That means that self-consciousness. I am conscious of the world in the second stage. First stage, I was unconscious. Second stage, I am conscious of the world. In the third stage, I am self-conscious. Now I am conscious that I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not this intellect, I am not the ego. There is only action. As everything is taking place in cosmos, similarly, actions are done according to the necessities. According to the necessities. We have to have that knowledge. That does not mean that my sense of responsibility is out. If I am not doing so, why should I be responsible? I shall come to that. But our knowledge, we should not be free. We should be free from our own false knowledge, false identification that I am this body, I am this mind, I am this intellect, I am this ego. That means I shall observe my thought, I shall observe my physical activities, I shall observe my emotions, and that is necessary. Now come to the practical life. Do not we do that in our practical life? Suppose our children are getting very much emotional in a crisis moment. As parents, what we do? We console them. We make them understand. No, don't be emotional, because we are beyond that. We understand now he is emotional. Now he is emotional. Now we understand that because we are beyond that. So being conscious of our own propensities, own activities, own reactions, that is also a state of perfection. And that is due to Sanskriti. That is our Sanskriti. So a true rational being should be a man of a Sanskriti. Man of a Sanskriti means man of wisdom, man of the man who can utilize his own being, who can understand, who can realize the status of his own being, that he is not this, and he is beyond that. When a person acts with that level of consciousness, then his action will can never be bad. That must be good. That must be meant for lokasangraha. And that is the highest possibility of a responsibility. Who is a responsible agent? A responsible agent is one who is not trapped by either the imaginary world or the real world or himself by his own false identifications, false egos. That man can be really responsible. So by transcending our physical existence, physical world, here the possibility of a responsibility is not cancelled out. Rather, we become more responsible. More responsible. When we respect our father, that he is my father, that means he should transcend all types of false emotions that generally children have. That is why that is why he is father. That is why she is mother. That is why somebody is our teacher. That is why somebody is a sannyasi. That is why somebody is a yogi. Because they are beyond all types of imaginary emotions and all types of empirical emotions which are conducive to bondage. Emotion is necessary, but its degree should be transformed. Desire is necessary, but that desire should be converted into a positive desire. Selfish desire should be converted to selfless desire. In this way, we just liberate ourselves, not liberation. Liberation we shall attain, that is the future. But now what we are doing? We are just liberating ourselves from our bondage. We liberate ourselves from the bondage of the imaginary, unnecessary world, desires, attachments. Then we liberate ourselves from our own ignorance, own false identifications by renunciating so many obstructing factors. And after that, the state we shall attain, that is liberation. So the state of liberation will be attained by liberating, when we shall liberate from the conditionings. So the liberate as the verb is more important. We have to liberate ourselves from the false knowledge or ignorance or the bondage. We have to liberate, and we have to liberate that by realization of the truth. In the next session, we shall discuss karma sannyasa. That is a very beautiful topic. We shall discuss that we shall come to such a state, after this discussion, we shall come to such a state that there is no karma at all. We are doing everything, but there is no agent and there is no action at all. We shall discuss that in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Das, for yet another nice lecture. It was so beautiful. A lot of things could be discussed. You took the thread from the last class and you have articulated the issue of bondage and liberation by taking action into account. And it's now time for interaction. If I look into the chat box, well, it is by Sravani Misra. Well, it is not a question at all. Well, Siddharth, thank you for your understanding on the issue of bondage and liberation. And that's how she got benefited by your lecture. That's what she wants to say. I don't see any question in the chat box. Let me wait for half a minute. If somebody feels like asking something, they can unmute themselves. I'm not asking anybody. If somebody wants from their own side, they can unmute and put forth the suggestions, or if they have certain queries in their mind, they can put forth, or any sort of suggestions, anything, any observation that also will do. So you are welcome. Just 20 seconds. Let us wait, and finally we'll move to the summarization uh, event of this webinar. Well, I don't find anybody unmuting because the lecture is so clear, so precise, and I don't think specific questions would be there because everything is so clearly defined by him. So let me make a brief synopsis of what he said. Now, taking the note from the last class where he said that action is the immediate cause of bondage, and ignorance is the root cause of bondage. Now, in this lecture, he restricted himself to the action part, and he tried to show how action leads to bondage and how to be free from that sort of bondage. Now, he said, to start with, he said that we have lived a life of so long, but still we are not doing actions in the right sense. Whatever we are doing, they are simply reactions. They cannot be called actions, because whatever we are doing with a sense of agency. We are doing with certain past memories. We have certain feelings for the future, sacrificing the present at large. So we are taking the mind, we are having a mind greatly affected by the past and the future, and also we are in an imaginary world. So all this actually they bind you. Your actions done in this sense will bind you. So he talks of three stages in man's life, wherein he first of all takes a imaginary stage where man lives in the world of imagination. Like he gave a beautiful account to this by saying that we think many things in our dreams. We dream a lot. Many things come in our dreams, and when we wake up in the morning, we see, oh, all that was a dream. It was nothing true. It was nothing real. So also, in this world, we also are carried by various imaginations, and imaginations are, as we know, they are problematic. They bind us, and the more are the imaginations of a negative sort, the more is the bondage, and that leads us to a problem sort of thing. So, well, having said this, he also said that the so-called real world, the scientific world, the world of existence, that the world that we see around us, that is also that we find in the waking stage. That is also not the real world. It is again a false world. The scientific world is not in the true sense real. And he says, as long as man feels himself connected with the scientific world, he identifies with this world, he sees himself to be a part of the world, and somehow this world also in the waking state does bind him. So one has to, if somebody is preparing for liberation, so he has to be not only be free, he should be free from not only from the imaginary world, but also the so-called real world, the scientific world, because that also bind us. So, having said this, he said no. Then, if this dream world is not true, if this the so-called real world is not true, so what sort of world that we are trying to think of? So he said the knowledge, the thought process in us that I am not this world, that I am not this physical world, is the real mantra to doing right karma, a good action. So being in this world, you need to be disconnected from this world, thinking that I am not this world. So, having said this, then he said, well, when somebody is in a sattvic stage, even say, well, the imaginary actions, the actions connected with this physical world, they bind you, they are, say, they will not lead to your liberation. Then he talks of what are good actions then. Suppose somebody is carrying the, very good acts, say, the acts of charity, the acts of compassion. So, these are good actions that come from the sattva guna. Then he raises a question whether sattva guna, somebody who is sattvic and who carries very good actions, whether that sort of actions also bind. Well, he answers yes. Even the sattvic actions do bind human beings if there is a sense of ego that you do charity, forget about charity, then there is no problem. Have a sense of compassion, forget that you are compassionate, you are kind enough to people. So but if you do a sense of charity, you do some charitable work, and at the same time you think of charity with an ego sense, you have an ego that I have done this charity work, then that also binds, because as you say, even sattvic guna is a product of the prakriti, one of the three elements of prakriti. So the sattvic guna also binds you to the world, binds us to the world. So what should be done? So as long as we carry on even the good actions with the sattvic sense, with the sense of ego, that is going to bind us. So we have to be free from, number one, free from the imaginary world. Number two, we should be free from the so-called physical world, the so-called real world, and also we should be free from our sense of ego, a sense of agency. So it is what is required. Now, having said this, he made a distinction between prakriti and sanskriti. So he said the sattvic actions do carry a prakritic element of prakriti. So it has to be transformed. So how it is possible? Only when only when one does an action without a sense of agency, without a sense of ego, but with a sort of inner consciousness. So if the inner consciousness is the guiding principle, then there would be say no sense of identification with the physical world. There will be no sense of identification with the personal ego. So that sort of personality feel himself self-conscious. So he was speaking of the three worlds, the imaginary world where somebody feels as if he is conscious, but everything is the appearance. So imaginary world is unreal because it appears as if it is the real world. Imaginary world appears as if it is the real world, but in the true sense it is not a real world. Now coming to the conscious world, he says that is also in the final analysis is not the real world. Now what is the real world? The real world is the inner self, and what is the element in that? Being connected with the own self consciousness. So a yogi, a karma yogi, has this feeling of self consciousness where he totally sacrifices. There is no sense of ego. There is no sense of agency. So what is he is not trapped by the imaginary world or the so-called scientific world or by the sense of ego or any aspect connected with this physical or the imaginary world. He is totally free from all this. So such a person who is self-conscious, free from all the externalities. So every such a person, he is a karma yogi. Every action that he does liberates him every moment. Every moment he is freed from the chains of the imaginary and the physical world. So such man who a man, a yogic man without a sense of agency, without a sense of ego, does his work with a sense of moral duty, with a sense of protecting dharma, without having a sense of agency, and bracketing all sorts of past dispositions and the future. Neither is connected with the past nor the future. Neither the past affects him nor the future has any puts any sort of concern on him. He's in the present and he's totally free from the chains of all sorts, and wherein every action that he carries liberates him every moment. So Liberating means he is getting freed from the imaginary world, the physical world, finding a path towards the ultimate liberation uh, where he can find a sort of peace that is not affected by anything. So a karma yogi's actions liberate him every moment. He is not liberated in the true sense. Every action that he does, a karma yogi, whatever actions that he does, these actions liberate him every moment, paving him a path to attain that ultimate goal of the state of liberation. There is no path to come back, where he finds himself in total peace, not affected by anything. So this is the entire structure of the talk of Professor Das. It was a very good lecture, a lot of take from his lecture, a lot of things that we could know from him. I thank you from the core of my heart for such a beautiful lecture. Well, if I look into the chat box, still, yes, Rabani Mishra madam has said something to say. Not to take any credit. Yes, Shravani Mishra madam she says from the entire lecture, she says, she compliments you. Well, it's a good thing that in the entire course of our action, we should that we carry in our lives without thinking of the credits of our action, without thinking of what has accumulated from the action. It is our duty to do, and we have what to do. So that should be the course of action, being self-conscious and not connected with the world. And the very beautiful example sir always gives, that be connected with the world with a sense of we may be attached with the world, but there should be a sense of detachment every time. So he was giving in the earlier class. He gave an example of a water droplet on a lotus flower. Like a lotus flower, you are there in the world, but still totally detached from the world, and you are not connected. You may be in the world. You appear as if you are in the world, but still totally detached from the world, being totally self-conscious of what you are and whatever actions that you do. They don't bind you, they liberate you at every moment, at every step in your action, making your action as a journey, or a karma marga as a journey to that ultimate abode. So this is the message, this is the take from your lecture, sir. Thank you very much for this very nice lecture. Now, I don't see any other question in the chat box. Now, by thanking the speaker and also the participants, let me move to Professor. Let me move to Srimati Swarnalata Tripathi Madam for proposing a formal vote of thanks. Over to Srimati Swarnalata Madam.
Thank you, sir. Namaskar to all. I thank all the participants for their being presence in this session. I am grateful to Pramod sir for delivering talk on action, bondage and liberation. Karma is not the cause of bondage or liberation. Rather, karma is nimitta or instrument leading to our attachment and detachment. I thank Dr. Rao sir for giving a beautiful concluding remark at the end of the session. Wisdom Forum is highly grateful to Dr. Rao sir for his selfless dedication and contribution. I thank you all. We shall meet again next Saturday with a new topic. Thank you. Pranam.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, madam. I also thank Swarnalata Tripathi madam for being with this being connected with this webinar, carrying on all the activities that are needed for carrying on this webinar and making this webinar successful. I also thank you, madam, for your selfless effort for all these activities in this platform. So by thanking everybody, let me declare this meeting closed for this day, and hope to meet you tomorrow for a lecture on good governance and democracy. So thank you all. Good night. Thank you. Now the meeting is closed. Thanks everybody.